talking about cheaper tools. And this has been a topic I wanted to make for a little while, just because there's a lot going on in the automotive industry. There's a lot of changes going on. There's a lot of things in the works. Now, I do know we're early, so I'm going to give everyone time to get in here. I'm just going to set up a few of the tools that we're going to talk about, and then we'll kind of break down the difference in quality versus maybe something just to get the job done, and sometimes how that's not worth it. But as always, I'll give you guys a little time to file in here. There we go, starting to get some people in. Welcome to this Saturday's live. This one's on cheaper tools. So when we're looking at it, I'll break down quite a bit of stuff that's going on here with this. I'm also going to give you guys kind of a rundown of future topics coming up as well. I want to lay out some of these tools that I got that are absolutely, I just bought them to do one job, but they've been a good tool and they stuck around. So I definitely want to show you guys that. Like I said, we're a little bit early yet, so we'll give it some time for you guys to file in. Let me know if you guys like the earlier setup, me getting started a little bit earlier, if you guys just want me to start on time. Then we can decide kind of the best times to go live, like structuring it and scheduling it so that it's more when everyone's flowing in. Rogue One, how's it going? Good. This topic, Rogue One, new to the channel, welcome to have you on board. We do a lot of different stuff. Every week is a different topic. This week we're going to be covering some cheaper online tools because we have a massive project coming up. And because this is such a big topic, there is a big repair that I have that I need to do. And I'm going to flip you guys around so you can see that repair. There it is. So we had a massive deer hit on that car. You guys see one of the big parts laying in front of that will be going on that car. In order to fix some of the other smaller pieces, I had to buy some tools online. So I wanted to cover this in today's video before we really got into it. And Rogue One, thank you for subscribing. I really do appreciate that. All the subscriptions really do help to kind of help boost this channel and push it forward. This year, we're really focusing on growing and doing a lot of newer stuff to the channel. And I do have some other stuff that I'm going to ask that I put a poll up later and get you guys' input on, should I go this route? And it was something that both me and the people behind the scenes have talked about. It's something that would be pretty beneficial to you guys. And you guys would see an aspect of a repair that I normally don't agree on. The only reason I'm willing to do it is the vehicle is very clean and it would help extend the life of this thing dramatically. I could easily get another 10, 15 years out of this vehicle by doing that repair. Again, that is later, so make sure you guys stay tuned. I will have some news at the end, and we can go ahead and do questions if you guys have automotive questions during today's topic. Because I'll be watching a little bit closer and I do have people behind the scenes helping me with those kind of things now, we can go ahead and do questions whenever you guys have them. So let me make sure I've got a good solid internet connection for you guys. Okay, there. I wanted to fix the internet quality. I noticed a little bit of hiccup in there, so that should be better. Okay, thank you guys for being patient. Let's go ahead and kind of dive into a little bit of the topic. I'm going to start off as I always do with announcements. Thank you guys for all the support. It really has helped. Thank you for hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and ringing that notification bell so you guys get notified when we go live. We do this every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time. So every week is a new topic. Every week we do something different. Now, the only time that I don't is when I'm either sick or away with family stuff. That's the only time I don't do one, but I try to let you guys know that as soon as I can. Today's topic is cheaper tools. So I showed you guys the project behind you now that we have coming up on the deer hit. What tool would I have needed to buy online in order to make that work? If you can look low enough, you're already knowing. So what we have here is a plastic welder. Why would I need a plastic welder? Well, I could either put the bumper back together by plastic welding it, but you guys already saw the package in front of it, so I don't need to do that. But there are a bunch of smaller plastic pieces that this is going to become very beneficial. And some of those plastic pieces I can't replace. They're not easily able to get. I could go to the dealer and spend way too much money, which I don't feel like doing, or I can put it back together with the plastic welder. And I don't need to get fancy because the pieces that we're doing this on, you're not going to see. So it doesn't really matter like how clean it looks. On a bumper, you need to make sure the outside is very clean and very smooth flat so that when you go to paint it, it doesn't show the staples that you're welding into the crack. For the pieces that are hidden, we don't need to clean them up that well. We can just get by with running these in there, snipping them off flush, maybe a little bit of just get rid of the burr, but that's it. But I needed to get this tool in order to do that project. Now, we run into this from time to time, and it doesn't matter if you're a professional mechanic or somebody working in your own garage. You're going to come into a project where you need to have a certain tool to make things work or to finish a project. Oftentimes, it's better to buy the tool and have it on hand than it is to just skip over it or borrow the tool from someone else and then have to return that tool. I have gotten most of my tool collection this way. When I need a tool and I'm in the process of doing a repair, I buy the tool. And what happens is over time, I wind up collecting all the tools I need, such as this little bugger that does the O2 sensors. Without this, you cannot do an O2 sensor without damaging the wire. So, special socket, once you got it, you always have it. Sometimes you'll do a repair where you don't really need it other than that repair. This is where the tool loaner program comes into play. So if you decide to go the loaner tool route, you can get your specialty tools such as this. Now, I don't return these because I do automotive repair. Why would I return a tool that could make me money in the future? I'm better off just hanging on to it as long as it's not a super expensive tool. Some pullers are really expensive to get. If you bought, some pullers are $500, $1,000. Well, you're not going to spend that much if you can do it on a loaner tool program. Use the tool and return it. So that would be a specialty item that you wouldn't necessarily want to keep on hand. But a basic puller like this is a Pitman arm puller. Yes, we have a Pitman arm that we have to do on this channel. It's going to be coming up in the next few weeks. My main focus, though, is going to be on Malibu steel. I want to get the deer hit damage fixed, get that vehicle back on the road, and there's a bunch of projects we have to do to that thing. That vehicle will probably take a couple of months to do, and it's only because I'm working only on a Saturday and showing you guys everything. It's going to be an extended process. It's not going to happen over one weekend. And that being said, that's why I try to bring you guys all the content that I possibly can. I don't shortchange the content just to be able to get the project done. Because if I do that, you guys are going to miss a key piece that you guys need in order to do this in your own garage or at your own place. Whenever you're doing panel replacement, it's important to know that you have all the pieces. So we couldn't really push forward on tearing this car apart until everything came in. And the only reason I'm not tearing it down today, and yes, I have everything set up, that will be next week's video, is tearing that car down. We're going to get the bumper cover off. We're going to get all the plastic that's broken underneath the bumper cover off, figure out what we got to fix. The wheel liners are going to come out. all the plastic shielding underneath the front bumper is coming out, then I have a big decision to make. Do I take the time to tear the motor down and do the timing chain since the covers are going to be off? So yeah, that's what it is we've got that big project coming. And as we get into it, we need to get it done as soon as we possibly can, but I want to show you guys everything, especially that timing chain. I have a chance to farm it out to a friend of mine who would do it, and he's done quite a few of those motors just because I don't have the time to tear into it. He could get it done quick, but we're not going to show you guys what's going on. So I have to try to work with that topic and see how we're going to be able to do that and bring you guys the content, because I really don't want to miss out on that. That's a big job, and oftentimes they need to be done. On a Malibu, they need to be done at about 130 to 150,000 miles. If you let them go past 150, you run the chance of the chain stretching or the guides breaking, and it skips time. Once those motors skip time, the motor's cooked. There's no way to come back from that. So, again, tools that you buy for one-time use, you may choose to do a tool rental program. For us, we're going to keep this because good old Crimson Vortec needs a pitman arm, and it needs one pretty bad. It's loose enough that I noticed it when they did the alignment, and I can tell it's a little bit squirrely in the steering. It's a little soft and spongy, and it tends to kind of wander a little bit. That's all due to a bad pitman arm, and the easy way to fix that is just to pop it out. But you got to have this tool in order to do that. Let's cover impacts, because this is a heated topic online. Heated topic is everyone thinks you have to have the Snap-on brand or you have to have a high-end brand in order to do your impact work. Okay, I will get to your question in just a second. Let me finish up this impact. So, when it comes to impacts, you want to have a quality impact, so don't buy the cheapest one you can find. Next, realize that if you buy the cheaper one, there's a good chance that the impact could not have as much longevity to it. Now, does that mean buying a Snap-on is going to make it any more longer life to it? No, but they might actually give you a warranty. The warranty will help, but it isn't everything, guys. Warranty only goes so far, and if they feel that you are damaging it because you're not using it properly, they won't warranty it. So, impacts are one area that they know that they're getting abused pretty hard in order to do most of the automotive work. So there's a chance that they're not going to warranty these, especially from the bigger trucks, because these things are not cheap. You could pay over $1,000 for a good impact. And this one was near the range of almost 500 with batteries. That, this one was a pretty solid one. At the time that I bought this was the top of the model. And it's worked great. I've had this, I want to say, for over 11 years. Maybe closer to 10, but I've had this a very long time. The batteries, I still got the 2 original batteries with this impact. Now, I use them when the batteries get below the 2 dots. So this battery pack has 3 dots on it. When it gets 2 of them are missing, then I charge up my batteries, and I don't overcharge them. I charge them until they're full. I take it out of the charger right away. I also don't leave my batteries laying on the ground. When I'm working on stuff, the last thing you want to do is take and set your impact on the floor like this, because that cold, especially in northern climates, that cold will radiate into this lithium battery and will shorten the life of the battery. It's better to lift this up and put it onto a bench or put it onto something like a creeper or an egg crate than letting it sit on the cold floor. So, a little bit of life tip for your batteries when you're dealing with impacts. The other thing is you'll notice impact batteries make a big difference on how much you can bust the nuts loose on particular projects. If you have very cheap batteries, meaning that maybe that's a off-brand manufacturer and it isn't the same brand as your battery, chances are those batteries aren't going to be strong enough to actually break some of the rusty bolts loose that you'll run into. So now that I've covered impact, let me get back to that question on the valve seals. So I don't want to let this question get away. You guys are taking your time to chat in your questions here. Any tips on how to do valve stem seals without pulling heads from the block? So if you're talking about the seals for the valve guides, yes, there is a way that we do this. And what we do is we thread a tube down inside. I'm wondering if I have that tool. Yes. For you guys, I dig to the bottom of my toolbox anytime. So here's what we've got. What you can do is you buy one of these kits. Now what this is checking your compression ratio. But why would you need this tool for doing valve stem or valve guide seals? Because what you're going to do is take this hose out, and oftentimes it'll come with an adapter for different threads. But you're going to take this out. This is the piece you want. And depending on how yours is, like this one has this in it, this valve seat would have to get taken out of this one. You can take the seat out of here with a tire tool, such as this. So you'll take that needle and seat out of there. You'll thread this down into the head. Why am I going to such lengths to explain this to you? Because what you're going to do is put air pressure into the cylinder so that it forces the valves to stay up inside, so that when you take those little compression springs off of the top of the valve spring and you pull your valve spring out, you'll be able to get at the seal that sits down inside there. What you'll need to do is take a 90-degree pick like so, and you'll have to get at that seal and pull that seal up. Once you pull the seal up, then you can go ahead and press a new one down. But the reason that you're doing this is to put air pressure inside that cylinder so the valves don't fall down inside the engine. That's the last thing you want. If the valves fall down in, you're pulling the head off anyway. So hopefully this answers your question. If you have anything related to that, let me know and I'll break that down for you. But basically you're going to need your compression tester. You're going to need to take the needle and seat out of it and put air pressure into the cylinder, forcing the valves up. And that can be done one cylinder at a time. Correct. Yes, one cylinder at a time. You need to do each cylinder independently. Don't just pull all your spark plugs out, plug this in there, and then think you can do the other ones. You have to move this hose to each cylinder each time and pressurize the cylinder to force those valves up so that they don't fall down in. That air pressure is what's going to keep them in there. So also have a good air compressor, one that isn't going to run out of air. And if you're getting a lot of blow-by running a lot of air in there, what can happen is that blow-by will cause the valves to fall. So if you're having a bunch of air coming past the valves, you already have a valve grinding issue, meaning that the valves aren't seating perfectly, whether you have good valve seals or not. But yes, that's how you do it, was one cylinder at a time, pressurize the cylinder, pick the old one out, slide the new one down in, make sure you have like a tube that fits perfectly over that valve so that you can slide the seat down and seat that valve or that seal properly. Use a lot of oil when you're seating those new seats in there. Don't just shove those in there dry. You'll tear the brand new ones, and then it was a complete waste of time. As you guys saw, I do buy Icon tools. You guys should already know, if you're already a fan of this channel, you guys already know I buy some tools from Harbor Freight. Harbor Freight has good tools as long as you're not buying the baseline tools. Don't buy their cheap stuff. I have some of their cheap stuff, okay, guys? The reason I have the Icon picks, because I used to have an old set of Snap-on. And yes, I do have some Snap-on, guys. I have some Snap-on tools. So anybody that knows Snap-on tools knows what these look like. But I also had bought a super cheap set of picks. The reason you don't want to buy super cheap is because the metal quality is not very good. This one, the tip is broken off several times. And if I need to do something where I could break the pick, I'll use the super cheap ones. But I don't use these when it's something that I really need to be very careful with, or something that I need a sharp point in order to get in there. Okay, so to answer your question, I seen you dropped in this follow-up question. So you're asking, does it matter what position it's in? Obviously, the more air you can have in the cylinder, the better it is, because there's a lot higher volume of air pushing those valves up. You can do it with the piston all the way up, but you're not going to get as much air in there. What can happen is, without having as much air pressure in there, it could cause them to seep enough to where the valves want to drop. And you don't want to do that. You want to make sure there's enough air pressure in there. Some guys like running them up closer, because if they fall, they don't fall down in too far to where they can't work at it. I don't like that theory. I like to keep enough air in there so that it doesn't have a chance of those valves falling. That one is a matter of personal like and dislike. If the valve falls, you're tearing the head apart. It stinks when it happens, but that's what you have to do. Right now, you're trying to do a trick. If the trick works, it saves you from pulling the head. If you have to pull the head, you're going to probably have the valves all reground and reseated at a machine shop. You're also probably going to have the head shaved so that when you put it back in with the new gasket, that it seals up perfectly. Again, those are some of the negative sides of pulling the head. Anytime you pull a head, it has to be machined. And to answer the next question about adjusting your timing chain, you will have to pull that front cover. Unfortunately, in order to find where the marks are on everything, including the crank, oftentimes they're buried behind that cover, and you're not going to see that without removing the front cover. If you wind up pulling the head, you're going to pull the front cover anyway. That's a negative side effect of this trick. If the trick works, you should be good as long as your timing was good. If you have double cams, sometimes you can find the marks might be on top. So if the marks are on top, you can line those up, but you're still not going to know what that crank is without pulling that front cover. So unfortunately, if you're looking at figuring out timing, you will have to pull the front cover. I'll put some of my tools here away as you guys chat in some questions, and then we'll keep moving on to the topic of some of these tools. So as you saw, this one was a Bosch. Thank you, sir. Not a problem. Hopefully that helps. Like I said, go slow. Don't rush. One cylinder at a time. Put air into that cylinder and make sure that cylinder has plenty of air in it. The more air you have in it, the less chance you're going to have of those valves falling inside when you change out those seats. And oftentimes, if the seats are getting questionable anyway, I tend to lean on the side of I'm just going to swap it or pull the head and do the full machining, because I've found out that too many times you go to just replace the seats, the valves are already leaking dramatically, and you'll find that out. If you hook this tool up and you start pushing air in it and all you hear is loud hissing, if you go to take that spring off there, that valve could fall straight down in because the valves are no longer seated tight enough against there to seal up. If that's the case, you're going to be tearing the head apart anyway. Again, what I showed you was only a trick, but if it works, it'll save you a bunch of time. It'll also save you a little bit of money on head gaskets and machining. But if that trick doesn't work, you're going to be machining no matter what. All right, to continue on with tools, where else do you want to focus on buying quality tools? Well, here's one that you really do need to focus on buying a higher quality tool. Guys, make sure you hit the like button. Really, we need to bring the engagement up. It really does help the channel. So make sure you guys hit that like button. So high quality torque wrenches are crucial to any repair. If you don't get the right torque on something, you can either damage the threads or you risk it coming loose on you going down the highway. And a good example of that happening is when people lose their wheels going down the road. What happens is the torque on the lug nuts is not correct. And when it's not correct, it will slowly walk the bolts or the nuts off of the threads on the studs. As those walk out, the wheel starts to wobble, it gets more aggressive, and eventually the wheel comes off. So, torque wrenches are key. Anytime a wheel comes off, and you guys see me take one off, there will be a torque wrench involved every single time. It doesn't matter the situation. I always retorque my wheels. I never trust that. That's not good for your torque wrench. I don't know how long that's been like that. So, I'm about to talk to you guys about something that I just did that's important for you guys to remember when you have a torque wrench. I now have to get this torque wrench recalibrated. Why? Because I didn't back it down from the torque that I had it set at the last time. Torque wrenches have to be accurate. If they're not accurate, they're not doing you any good. This one stayed up at 110 foot-pounds, which was the last time that I torqued a wheel on a vehicle. Because of that, now this spring is somewhat stretched in here and it can be adjusted right here. But you have to have the right tool to put this end in and see where that's at. And as they click it, they can figure out exactly where it's at. So they'll set this at 100 pounds. When they go to put it onto the gauge and turn the gauge, if the gauge doesn't say 100 pounds when this clicks, then it's not accurate. But bummer for me, but now I have to have this calibrated. So maybe I'll look into some tools that I can get that'll show you guys how to calibrate your own stuff. That could be something I could look into for the future. But yes, always make sure your torque wrenches are calibrated. Make sure you always use them anytime a wheel comes off. And very important to buy the higher quality ones. You can buy cheap ones and they may not work the best. And they actually say there is a old school torque wrench out there that has the needle that sits right here. So as you're turning it, the handle will move and that needle will stop at the torque spec that you want it. So as you're turning this, that needle will move to the 110 mark and then you're done. The funny thing is they say those are always accurate for the lifetime of the torque wrench. And the only reason that it could be that way is because of how it's set up through the handle. There is no springs, there is no adjustment. It's all done through the torque wrench itself, meaning it's a straight up old school mechanical torque wrench. If you've got one of those, you already know that they're extremely accurate and you don't ever need to recalibrate them. This one, unfortunately, I do. And yeah, it's kind of a bummer that I didn't set this back to 0. I should have. And because I didn't, I'm going to have to fix that. And this one is set to 0. So this is another brand. ATD is a good brand for torque wrenches. It is a little bit lower on the scale, so I wouldn't go any lower than the ATD. They're basically a Snap-on cheaper version is what they are. So they're kind of the cheaper version of the Snap-on. Their adjustment is here. If you ever have a torque wrench that doesn't have the ability to do an adjustment, don't buy it. because if you can't adjust these, you'll never get them accurate. All right, let me cover the next thing here, and that's ratchets. Guys, we use ratchets all the time. There is no time where we're not using either a ratchet or a screwdriver on a project. 9 times out of 10, the first thing you're grabbing is a ratchet. If the ratchet is poor quality, let's say it's one of the cheaper knockoffs. This is an Icon, a Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh is a little bit cheaper. Icon would be a little bit better. But the reason I went with this is just to get more quarter drive ratchets. A lot of my ratchets are Craftsman, older school Craftsman. That's been around for a long time. I've had these ratchets for a very long time. I have not had one problem with these ratchets, and I've been pretty aggressive with these on all of my repairs. So if I needed to break stuff loose, I've even had to slide bars onto this, which is the 1/2-inch drive, just to be able to break stuff loose. I've put in a lot of pressure on all of my ratchets. And the only one I really had a trouble with was one Icon that I bought. It had chewed up teeth in it. And that was something I wanted to talk to you guys about. The big selling feature right now in ratchets are the more teeth, the better. The more teeth, the shorter you have to turn it in order to get it to grab. But you also have a risk of shearing off those teeth because there's so many of them. The bigger teeth have a bigger bite, meaning that you won't have an issue of stripping over the head of the ratchet. The old Craftsman ones have large teeth in it. I won't shear these off. I will break the actual handle of the ratchet before I shear the teeth off, or I will snap this head off before I'll chew up the teeth. Not the case on the cheaper ratchets. And the more teeth in the ratchets, the higher chance it's going to strip the teeth off inside. Once it does that, the ratchet's junk. I think Harbor Freight does have a return policy on their ratchets, so if it does break, just bring it back. They'll give you another one. The only thing is it's really annoying if you're in the middle of a project and you strip one of these over and now you don't have a ratchet to finish your project with. So again, when it comes to ratchets, usually, guys, let's be honest, if we're doing a lot of automotive, you're going to have more than one ratchet around to finish your project. Yeah, we may not want to use the swivel head, but if you stripped this one out, you could get by with the swivel head. So having multiple tools around, especially in your ratchets and screwdrivers, is pretty important. Well, let's talk about some specialty stuff. We already talked about our specialty socket. How about this specialty socket? This is a hub socket. So if you're doing wheel bearings, you will need an oversized socket, such as one of these. This oversized socket is designed to be able to handle the spline and reach the nut to turn that nut off. It needs to be deeper. It needs to be able to hook onto a large size nut. Usually these are a 33, 32s, 36s. So these are all pretty common. Hulk, good to have you in here today. Good to see my mods in. Congrats. Thanks for coming in today. We're doing good. So next, we're talking about specialty sockets. This would be one of them. This one's for doing spark plugs. Why is this so special? You can buy a spark plug socket that has the rubber on the inside. But why is this so special? Well, this one is because this is attached to an extension. The worst thing we hate is when this socket becomes unattached from this extension. When you're pulling this out, the last thing you want is the socket to stay down inside the hole. So in order to figure that out, I went this route. I bought the extension that's attached to the socket so I don't have to worry about this. When I go to pull this one out, it's going to come out. The only problem is I could lose the rubber piece that's inside of here. Once this comes out of here, it's important that we glue this back in and get it seated down properly. But you don't want to put a ton of glue on it because it'll just gum everything up. But so far, this one has stayed put. If it comes loose, more than likely, I will put a dab of glue on it and stick it back down in there. I'll probably do it for you guys as a video. Guys, make sure you hit the like button. It does help the channel and it helps us grow. I really do appreciate you guys coming in here on this Saturday. And again, the reason we're doing this video is because I needed this to do that. That deer hit caused a little bit of plastic damage behind that bumper cover. And where we're having the trouble finding the pieces for it are in the radiator area. There's some plastic shielding that is getting very hard to get. So rather than me having to chase it down, I'm just going to fix that plastic. So that's the main reason why we're doing today's video, is to show you guys these tools before we get started on this project. Because once I dig into it, I plan on digging really hard at that car and getting it as close to being able to work on it and get it done as possible. I really want that car done in only a few weeks. The problem is trying to show you guys all of the processes throughout. So there might be like 3 videos just on the timing on that engine alone, because I don't want to skip anything and leave out important details when doing timing. It's not something you ever want to rush. If you're doing timing on a car, make sure you take your time, make sure your marks are lined up before you take the old stuff out. Because if it isn't in time before you start, you're going to have problems down the road. So super, super, super important to make sure that all of those pieces are in place and working the way they need to before you take out the chain. Because once the chain comes out, you're going to lose your timing if it wasn't accurate to begin with. So now you have no idea where anything is, and you're hoping that the marks from factory line up. If you hadn't checked it before, you could find out, hey, one of these marks are slightly off. I've had it happen. We actually had it happen on the Toyota. The 04 Toyota Tacoma, we did a timing belt on it. And we noticed that the marks are not perfect. And because they're not perfect, had we not set the timing first before taking the belt apart, we could have caused that belt to jump a tooth. And if it would have jumped a tooth, we would have lost the timing. And the chances are we could have wound up wrecking a valve. Hulk, is it a chain and not a belt? Yes, the Malibu is a chain. That is a timing chain. The reason we have to do that one, though, is usually between that 130 to 160. If you don't do the chains, the guides go bad. This is a GM problem, is the timing chains go bad. And it isn't that the chain itself has gone bad other than that they stretch. It's that the guides get worn out. So we have to go through, redo the timing on it. Now, the 04 Toyota Tacoma, that is a belt. That is a timing belt, and there are marks on the belt. So if you don't have those marks lined up where they're supposed to be, a whole bunch of bad things happen. And there's a trick I'll be showing you guys when we go to do the chain on that one. Before you put everything back together, it is in your best interest to turn that motor over twice. Not once, but twice. Go 2 full revolutions of that chain to make sure that you don't hit a valve. You're better off catching it at that point than you are to let it slide and have bigger issues. Yeah, so the Malibu, that's going to be a chain, but the guides go bad. There's also an upgrade or a service bulletin on that car that I'm going to be covering when we do that. That service bulletin is based on a bad design from the manufacturer that they chose not to fix unless you bring it in and need to have timing work done. Then they do the service bulletin update, but they won't do it before that. And you guys are not going to want to miss that. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, because that one is going to be key if you have any Chevy vehicles with the 2.4 liter in them. That upgrade is necessary to do. Hulk, what year is it? That one is a 2012. So 2012, that one's got 144 on it, I think, is where I'm at. So I'm already in the range of when it's time to do that chain. And it's better to just go at it, get it done, and make sure that I'm good to go. Also, we're still kind of tossed up on, are we going to sell the car, keep the car? There's been a lot of changes behind the scenes in the last 2 months, guys. Everything from my daily job to everything going on behind the scenes with the channel. So there might be, that car might be going down the road. And if it does, it doesn't really affect me too much, other than it's one less vehicle I have sitting around that either I drive it sometimes or I don't drive it hardly at all. And we've already got the Toyota Tacoma, which I don't drive a lot. And obviously, it's not really a winter vehicle because it's not four-wheel drive. It's a Toyota pre-runner. But at the same time, it's a Southern vehicle with absolutely no rust on it, an 04 with only 40,000 miles on it. So super low miles. I'm not in a big rush to drive it and burn it up, use it up, consume it. To me, it's good enough the way it sits that I'll use it when I want to use it. But for the most part, that's not really a daily for me. The daily is the Crimson Vortec, which is our '01 GMC Jimmy. We cook. Just had my 2010 Honda Accord timing chain tensioner guides and actuators replaced. Yep. So that's very expensive. At a shop, absolutely. Anytime you deal with all of those timing components, you're looking at a minimum of probably $2,000 spent to do timing components. And a lot of it is just labor intensive. It isn't that the parts are super expensive. You probably only spent maybe 500 in parts, but I can guarantee you that the labor was probably closer to 15. And if you were at a professional shop, you can easily tack another 1,000 to 2,000 onto that bill. Yep, labor was 1,600. Yep, not a bit surprised. That's very common nowadays in shops, and that's why I'm trying to come on here and show you guys how to do some of these repairs. You know, some things like timing, you definitely want to have somebody who knows what they're doing, because timing, you only get one chance. If you mess it up, the motor goes bad, that's it. As far as other components, those you can do yourself, such as a battery. Now, some places will offer free battery changes, but some places will only do it on certain batteries. Or the batteries that you get there may not be very good, so you might want a different battery source. He is Honda certified. Yep. Anytime you go with certified people, they're going to be a lot higher priced. Now, with that, especially on the timing, if he messes it up and it was at a shop, he's responsible for fixing that motor if it goes bad. That's the problem with going with smaller independent people, is oftentimes they have what I call a driveway warranty. Now, I try to do the best that I can, but there are certain things that I'm limited to, which is why I don't do a lot of open engine stuff. I don't tear into engines or transmissions because I'm not set up for it here. But a lot of my stuff is all maintenance. So in order to do what I do, a lot of it is just knowing how to do certain procedures to put things back together so that they don't fall apart or break. And that's really what I do. But yeah, anytime you're dealing with a professional shop that's certified, they have to carry some kind of warranty on their work. Meaning that if all of a sudden that timing chain jumps and that motor grenades, they have to be willing to cover that cost. Now, some of the newer shops are a little shady on that, so be careful. Make sure you do a lot of research on the shop. Make sure you do enough digging into them to find out if there's been any complaints about people having those issues coming back, especially timing stuff. You know, if somebody says, yeah, I took my vehicle there to have a timing chain done, my timing jumped and they didn't want to replace my motor, I probably wouldn't go to that shop to do your timing. It's one of those things where all it takes is one bad person to kind of wreck it for everybody else. To get back to this little guy here, This one I had to buy as almost a no-name or a low-named tool because I wanted this extension. I was sick of losing the socket down in there when I was doing spark plugs. I got tired of it. I got tired of trying to go in with the pliers to grab onto the socket. I wanted one where the extension was attached to the socket. So when I pull this out, I can pull the whole thing out. So sometimes specialty tools only come in the way that they're designed for a reason, and that's the only way you can get them. So I'm sure that all the big tools, Snap-on, Craftsman, Cornwell, they all make a version of this, but what they were going to charge for the version of this was not what I was willing to pay. And sometimes that's what we have to weigh. Cost versus reward. How much are we going to use it? Does it justify buying the higher priced one, or are the mid grades just as good? And in this case, it was just as good. So why am I going to go jump on a Snap-on truck and mortgage myself to the hills for tools? Probably not a good idea. I know my mechanics are about to get really ticked off of me here real soon because I'm about to rip on the tool trucks. Question, my battery is 2018, but was tested good. When to replace? All right, here's what I do for batteries. I use a general rule of thumb of 5 years. And the reason I say that is those batteries diminish over time. Most of the time, batteries that reach that 5-year mark are getting really close to needing to be replaced. That replacement point is key to keeping you off the side of the road. And it's not that the battery would put you off to the side of the road, but what can happen is over time, you're going to stress out your alternator because your alternator is having to overcompensate for a weak battery when you start the car. That alternator takes a hit. Eventually, the alternator gives out, and now you're on the side of the road because the alternator failed. So usually I say about the 5-year mark is when I change batteries. And what that does is make sure that I always have a good battery, that it will always start even at super cold temps or if it's super hot out. People that live in Arizona know this for a fact. When it gets super hot out, that's when they usually have battery issues because the batteries have gotten old, and really hot or really cold stresses the battery and shows its weak points. We cook. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, 5 years is my general rule of thumb. If a customer brings something in and their battery is 7 years old, I'm going to be recommending that they put a battery in as soon as they can afford it. If it's something where they put one in and there's, it's 2 or 3 years old, I kind of give them a heads up. Hey, next year or the year after, you might want to put a battery in it. The climate I live in, it gets extremely cold. And when it gets extremely cold, those batteries will not hold a charge, and they diminish their charge really quickly if the vehicle is sitting outside in negative-degree weather. We're about to have a really bad cold snap that's going to be like minus 11 degrees as a high. And when that hits, we're going to see a lot of cars stranded on the side of the road because their batteries were not up to handling it. And even when it gets that cold, it's hard on everything. It's hard on the oil. It's hard on the batteries. Lubrication doesn't work as well, so it's hard on transmissions or rear axles. So making sure fluids are topped, making sure the right weight oil is in it. This is a big misconception nowadays, is most people think, well, I have an oil leak, so I'm going to throw heavier weight oil in it. When you do that, what happens is it causes the oil pump to stress harder to force that oil to the top of the engine to lubricate everything. And when it's that cold outside, it has a harder time getting that oil up to the top of the engine. It's just a Napa Legend. Should I stay with that brand? I've got Napa Legends. Let's see, what do you guys got here? How do battery tenders work? I'll answer that in just a second. It has happened once to me on my Hyundai Sorento, as the battery was like 7 years old. Had to take help from people to push start it. Yeah, so Let's go with the top one, Napa Legend. I've used Napa Legend batteries. Just know that Napa Legend batteries are definitely a 5-year battery. Sometimes in that 4-year mark, they start getting a little questionable. So if you've got one that's already over that and it's a Napa Legend, you're probably all right. Again, try to get the higher line and always go for more cold cranking amps. The more cold cranking amps you have, the longer battery life you have. So if you have a battery that's 500 cold cranking amps or 600 cold cranking amps, the 600 is going to last longer, meaning that it can dwindle down farther before the vehicle is going to have issues. Also, certain vehicles require a certain amount of cold cranking amps to function properly. If that number isn't right, then the vehicle won't charge or function properly. It could cause a whole bunch of weird stuff. And that, you definitely don't want that. So I would find out what is recommended for the vehicle as far as cold cranking amps, then base your battery selection on that. Napa Legends, in fact, I think there's a Napa Legend in this car already. Give me a second. I'm wondering if it's hiding behind a cover. I can't show you guys on our Kia Soul because the Kia Soul still has a factory battery in it. And it's coming up on the mark for me to replace that one here at the end of this year. Yep, that's what's in there. Napa Legend, right there. So that's the battery that I got in here. And that Napa Legend has been a really good battery. This thing starts, it doesn't matter what the temp is. This thing fires up just fine. So I can't knock the Napa Legend batteries at all. But yeah, there you go. Napa Legend. Like I said, I haven't had too much battery issues with Napas. They've worked just fine. But again, I don't ever go past the 5-year mark. There's a reason for that. All right, let's go back up. Again, I agree with Hulk's comment there. RMH, Nevada, battery tenders. Let's go ahead and dig into that here for just a second. We Cook, thanks for having you on the channel today, and thank you for your questions. I really do appreciate your questions on that. I'm glad I was able to give you guys some insight on what he brought up. So, RMH Nevada, battery tenders. Here's the issue with battery tenders. If you put a battery tender on a battery and it's hooked into a car and the car already has a slow drain, like our Toyota Tacoma, our 04 Toyota Tacoma has a aftermarket alarm system in it. The aftermarket alarm system has a slow draw to it, meaning that it's constantly sucking power. The battery tender will chase that battery draw, and you're still going to run the risk of having a bad battery when you go to fire it up the next season. Now, it might not kill the battery to where it won't be bad after a year, maybe 2, but you are going to shorten the life of that battery. If your vehicle has a draw, the only way to solve that draw, if you park it, is to pull the battery, meaning you got to take and disconnect it. You can leave it sit in the vehicle, but disconnect it off of the cables so that it doesn't have a draw. The battery tender works to basically help extend the life of the battery by keeping it at a full charge and only giving it little bits of trickle charge. But I found that even battery tenders on the cheap batteries that are made nowadays might only give you a year or 2 longer on that battery. So you have to ask yourself, is the consuming the electric portion to keep that battery at a certain charge worth the cost of the battery? If you're going to get another year or 2 out of it, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if you're doing it every year for 6 years, you might have been able to actually buy a battery for what you stuck in electricity to keep that battery up. What I suggest is not the battery tender. I suggest just disconnecting the battery. Now, I know this stinks because you lose radio resets and all this. It's annoying to have to reset your radio. But when it comes down to it, what I'm spending to keep the battery up to charge versus just disconnecting it and setting it off to the side, sometimes it's better to just disconnect it and leave it sit. I've done this on the Toyota Tacoma quite a bit, and like twice now. I forgot to disconnect it when I put it into storage. Every time I forget to disconnect it, when I go back in the spring, the battery is toasted. The cell is destroyed. Battery will not hold a charge. And so it's wiser to make sure you disconnect that battery than it is to try to put a battery tender on it, is what I'm really trying to say. So if you got any other questions, I do know that some of the battery tenders are okay. They're not horrible. They don't really consume a lot of power. They're not putting a lot of power back into the battery. Because that's the other thing, is if it overcharges the battery and doesn't have a battery protection, that can be a bad thing as well. And some of the cheaper battery tenders out there will overcharge your battery. Hulk said, if we disconnect the battery for long, would we get check engine lights when reconnected? No, that's actually, it should be the opposite. The only vehicles that I've noticed that really have an issue with that are like stuff newer than 2015 that don't like having their battery swapped without relearning the battery. BMWs are horrible for this. If you pull a BMW battery, you actually have to program that battery to the car, meaning that if you disconnect it for long periods of time, when you go back in and hook the battery up, you're going to have to use a scan tool and program that battery back into the car. That is an extreme case. I don't see that in a lot of the domestic stuff yet. But yeah, that is one instance where disconnecting a battery would be bad, and you would put a battery tender on it, hoping that you could extend the life of that battery. Hulk, battery cover looks so neat. Yeah, it's factory battery cover, and I never wanted to pull it off, but it is what it is. It came on the car. I was going to leave it on there. That one's more of a daily driver car. It's not a hot rod or something special. I mean, I can tell you right now, that car normally from factory should get about 27 miles to the gallon average. We're averaging 31 because of one modification we did to that car. If you guys get a chance after this video or after this live, go back and look at when I put spark plugs in that car. You'll see the special spark plug I put in it, and the reason that car is getting 31 miles to the gallon average. So, well worth it, and the rest of my vehicles will be getting those kind of plugs. Hulk again, I wonder if it would do it on my Honda Centera. I don't think it would, because I'm pretty sure I've disconnected the battery on our Kia Soul already, and I didn't have an issue. Now, the only thing that it does do is does mess with some of the presets inside. So some of the electronic presets, meaning you have to go back through and reprogram some of your stuff. I can swap the battery in our Kia Soul, that has the 2.0 engine in it. I can swap that battery without a problem. Now, extended periods of time, I don't think it's going to make a difference, because usually those, when you disconnect the battery and it throws you that error code, meaning it doesn't recognize battery, it does it as soon as you disconnect it. It doesn't matter how long it's disconnected. It was the fact that it was disconnected. So when you have a system that's like that, that's what that means. And some of the more European vehicles, I want to say, have that as a built-in feature. Some of the Volkswagens had it for some weird reason. And it wasn't all of them. It was a particular line that had it. That when you disconnect the batteries, you have to reprogram the battery back in it. A lot of it is European or high-end luxury cars will do that, because they tie certain components to the battery, and if it doesn't receive signal constantly, it throws the code. And in order to reset that code, you have to reprogram the battery code into it. RM, there is no substitute for experience. Thank you for your help. Thank you, not a problem. Like I said, I've been turning wrenches since I was 13 years old. I've been doing this a very, very, very long time. And the things I've seen and the things I've done is the reason that I have this channel for you guys. I do this to give back. That's why I'm doing this. I don't profit very much from the YouTube side of things. I don't. It would be nice if I did one day, but I'm not really going to force it. I also don't really push for any of the sponsorship stuff because I don't want to feel obligated to review a product in a certain way. It's not how I want to operate. It just, for me, it's better to do the projects that I see, do the things that I see, and show you guys the results. It just works better that way. You guys get to see as I struggle. You guys get to see the challenges that I go through. That Malibu behind you guys is going to give me a headache. Even though it's a simple bumper cover, it's going to be a pain. The reason why is I didn't choose a GM bumper cover. I wasn't going to pay GM price for a bumper cover. I will cover that in a couple weeks when we're digging into it. Hulk. Oh, okay. If it was on the Kia, then it should be fine with the Hyundai too. Yes, because they're pretty much the same car company. So I really don't think they're going to have that code issue. I don't. Like I said, I've had the battery disconnected on a couple of different Kia Souls. There hasn't been that programming issue. That programming issue is more of the European high-end cars, stuff like that, that are running just crazy, wild electronics. Especially when you start getting into like some of your V10s and V12s and stuff like that. They put special sensors to monitor everything. Those sensors require constant electricity. It's crazy. Those systems, there's a reason why I don't touch a lot of European sports cars. They're a nightmare and a headache. Audi is a horrible example of over-engineering stuff that doesn't need to be there. But that's how they built their company. I can't really knock them for it, but at the same time, I don't really support them. Their timing belts are horrible. Their timing setups are horrible. Their maintenance programs are horrible. Audi, BMW, even Volkswagen, if you don't do your maintenance perfectly, on time, according to the book, your vehicle will go just sideways and fall apart on you. Toyota, you can run them into the ground and do very little to them. GM, you do need to do some maintenance. They're not super critical. For them, it's more of the oil changes. You do need to do your oil changes on time on a GM vehicle. There's no way about it. That VVT engines do not accept dirty oil in them. It will mess them up. The other ones that are pretty crucial, Kias are pretty basic. The only problem is Kia also chose substandard parts. And this is a problem that we've ran into with our Kia Soul, is we're pretty sure there's cracked piston rings in there and it's consuming oil. Unfortunately, it's not consuming enough oil for Kia to put a new motor in it yet, meaning I have to wait until it does. At some point, it's going to. We have a warranty for 20 years, 200,000 miles. So at some point, it's going to happen, and we're going to have to put a motor in it. They're paying for it. I am not doing it. That's why we bought the warranty. Hulk, thank you so much for all the knowledge that you share with us. Thank you guys for supporting me. Like I said, make sure you guys hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not followed already to the channel, or subscribe to the channel. It really does help. It helps the engagement. It helps gets us out there and gets this message out there. I'm not only doing this for myself. I have a producer behind the scenes. I have my mods. You guys are here to help support me and help this channel grow. So the more we can get this channel out there, the more we can do, the more projects I show you guys, the more that we can give content back. I really don't like the direction that some of the major shops are going. And I know here's where I'm going to start ticking off my fellow mechanics. I know there are a few mechanics who follow me. I think one of them is even my mod. Guys, tool trucks are a scam. I have to say this, and I have to just be honest. Tool trucks are a scam. They jack up the price because they bought the tools from who the tools are made by. They're jacking it up to sell it on their truck to you as a convenience because their truck came to your shop. Versus now you have to go to Harbor Freight. And I know this upsets a lot of mechanics and they scream, yeah, but the quality is so much better. Not from what I've seen. Not from what I've seen. I've seen high quality stuff. I've seen low quality stuff. And you just have to know how to pick out low quality when you see it. And let me give you an example. I showed you guys the pick tools already. So I have 2 of these. What is this? These are a tap and die set. Now, one set is so cheap, there ain't even a name on the front of it. It's super cheap. Yeah, it's locked up. Comes in a gray case, no name on it, tap and die set, super cheap. It worked all right. It did its job. Problem with the cheaper set is it didn't come with enough tap and dies. This set, and the reason I upgraded is I've had a few bolts that I haven't been able to chase threads on, and it's frustrated me because I've had to go buy new bolts. That being said, I went and bought a quality set. Now this was online again. And the reason I'm saying that it was online, because the pieces don't like to stay in where they belong. They float around and fall out. Okay, we do have a question that I'll get to here shortly, but I want to show you guys this. This is a much higher quality tap and die set. Tap and die sets are crucial anytime you're doing anything and you need to use the old bolts and fasteners. Whether you're using an old nut or an old bolt, you should chase the threads every time before you put the piece or the tools back in. If you don't chase them, what will happen is you can mess up the threads as you're putting it back together. Now my old set, again, had no name on it and came with a very limited set. This has a lot more in it. So I'm upgrading mine to this, and I'm going to be getting rid of my old set. I haven't decided if I'm going to do it as a giveaway or if I'm just going to ask if there's a friend that needs one. Haven't decided that yet. All right, so RMH Nevada. Do you have thoughts about HHO and how to defeat O2 sensors using an EFIE? Okay, here's the thing. Anytime you're dealing with an emissions and you're in an emission state, you have a problem. The problem comes in the fact that if for any reason it fails the test, you won't get certified. So in order to alleviate that problem, you have to find other workarounds that won't cause that issue. Now, let's say you have a faulty O2 system, or you've done so many mods that you don't have a choice. I used to have them here. I bet they're probably buried right now. I had a cheater. My cheater was, I had a thread that threaded down into the pipe. It had a very small hole in it, but there was another set of threads out here that I could thread my O2 in. And what that did was eliminated the amount that was coming in and hitting that sensor. Rather than the sensor being directly in the stream like it is when it's in the pipe. You pull it back so that it's not in the direct line. What that does is cheats the system to thinking that your emissions are working properly, when the truth is it's getting a limited amount of the emissions going through the pipe. That's one way of cheating it. Now, when certain places do their emissions testing, they're looking for stuff like that. So that's a little bit more tricky. As far as your question goes, if you're trying to use a tuner to get rid of your O2s, it becomes a lot harder, and oftentimes shops nowadays will not even do it because of the liability. At least here in the US, they've cracked down so hard on the tuners. When they start doing stuff like that and it gets out, they're getting fined hundreds and thousands of dollars at a time. This is very useful and interesting. Yeah, thanks. I've actually, for my people with the whole EPA stuff, I know this trick works. I won't tell you how I know it works or what vehicle I did it to, but I do know it works. By adding that piece in there, and I really thought I had it. Really thought I had it. Give me a second. Oh, it's buried. It's buried in my pile somewhere, guys. But what that does is it basically has the same threads as what's on the pipe side on one side of it. You thread that in. On the inside, there's a small little hole. What that tool was, or what that part was designed for, was for lawnmowers that would follow out spark plugs. So if they had a little bit of oil consumption issue because the lawnmower had gotten so old, what they do is they take and put that piece into it so that it'll still spark to ignite the fuel, but will keep the oil from following out the plug. It works the same theory as putting an O2 sensor in there instead. And oftentimes the same thread pattern on a spark plug is the same on an O2 sensor. Most people don't know that either. That's why some people will take and weld those on there and put spark plugs on it for their tailpipes, and then they'll use like a fuel igniter to send flames shooting out their exhaust. Same thing. So that's one way of getting past all of your emission stuff, is by installing that one piece in there that goes in there. What it does is pulls that O2 sensor out of the pipe just far enough that it doesn't get a full reading. That only works on heavily modified vehicles because you're trying to eliminate the amount that it's catching. I wish I had it because I could show you guys, but yeah, it's not this. This is a fitting for an airline, but it's similar to this. It'll have the threads in here would be for the O2 sensor to thread in. You wouldn't have the guts in there, and then this piece here would have threads on the outside of this that it would thread down on, and it would sit in there with your O2 sensor sitting out here. That's what it does. And it cuts down the amount of emissions that it catches. So hopefully that kind of helps you answer that question. If you have a good tuner that you trust, or somebody that you really do trust with electronics, you can have them tune it down to where the emissions would be acceptable. But oftentimes when you do that, you're going to find that in order to get it down there, they had to cut the horsepower quite a bit. Unfortunately, if you're in an emission state, you're going to have to find workarounds. And some emission tuners will work with you, some won't. Most of the time you need to have a really good working relationship with a tuner in order for them to push beyond what they're supposed to go. And a lot of that is just because of the regulations that have come down. All right, we'll throw that in as a news topic. There's been several shops in the last year that have been busted for doing tuning, and they wind up getting shut down. One of them was going to get charged well over $1 million because they were actually selling full delete kits for diesel pickups. And because of that, they got cracked down on. What most people don't know is Canada is a little less strict on the emissions than we are. So there are people who will take their trucks up to Canada to get deleted and then bring them back. And the issue is if they're not done right and they're caught coming back across the border without the emissions, you're going to get fined. And the owner of the truck then can get fined because they've done the modification. The EPA is just a whole bunch of bad stuff. RMH Nevada HHO makes your engine run smoother and cleaner. Some additives will help it run smoother. Octane is a huge thing. Most people don't realize this, but your lower grade, cheaper fuels are worse on emissions. The reason they sell them is because they're cheaper. It's cheaper to throw ethanol in it than it is to sell you straight gasoline, because gasoline has to be refined. Well, the more refinement that you do to the gasoline, the more it's going to cost you. And in order to achieve certain octane levels, you have to have a certain grade that you're doing. You can test this pretty simply by using a water, it's like a flask that has a whole bunch of numbers on it. You put a certain amount of gasoline in it, you put a certain amount of water in it, and based on where that water separates at, will tell you the grade of the fuel. When you take and cap it and shake it, you'll mix it up. Then you let it sit overnight. As it sits overnight, you'll start seeing what grade of fuel you have. A 91 octane is not supposed to mix with the fuel. So if you have any mixture within that fuel and water, then you're not at 91 because it absorbed in that water. It won't. Higher grade fuels do not absorb water. That's why people put heat or something like that in their fuel tank to get rid of the water, because that water comes from condensation, comes from extreme temperature changes. That extreme temperature change can cause condensation. The condensation gets in the fuel tank, starts getting into where all of a sudden your fuel pumps are picking up water instead of fuel, because the water will drop. And if the water drops to the bottom of the tank, it's just going to suck up water and mess up your injectors. Anyone who's had rusty injectors already knows that fact, because it'll suck up the water, and as it comes through, it'll rust everything going all the way up to the motor. And it'll rust out the fuel injectors because it had water sitting in there when you shut the engine off. Again, condensation sucks. I hate it, and this is why I try to run 91 on anything I'm storing. 91 non-oxygenated. Oxygenated is really bad for engines. It doesn't matter what they are. Oxygenated fuel is horrible because all it does is create rust. Hulk, does liquid moly Centec work? Is it worth it? Hold on. Let me grab something. All right. So you brought this up. I'm going to show you guys this stuff. I know it's not quite on the tool topic, but honestly, if you don't use the right stuff, you're going to be using a lot of your tools real quick. Here's one that I've got. This is a fuel treatment. Now, this is a treatment and stabilizer. Basically, it fights ethanol problems. This is why I tell you guys, on anything you don't drive on a daily basis, don't run ethanol fuel, ever. Ever, 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 ever. Run the 91 non-oxygenated or 93 non-oxygenated. Stay away from oxygenated and ethanol. So that's why most of the time, I won't use fuel treatments like that. That's why this is full. I haven't needed to use it. Anything I store has 91 in it. That Malibu behind you guys has 91 in it because I knew I was going to be parking it for the winter to work on it. And here's another one, injector cleaner. Lucas is a good brand. I trust Lucas, but at the same time, all right. For my producer, batteries are going low on our walkie-talkies, so I might not be using mine much more anymore today. Just had to let that person know. So Lucas, good brand. their oil treatment has been known worldwide to protect engines for a long time. It does help overall, but when it comes down to it, I wouldn't trust using it all the time. And if you're just using it as a temporary, it's nice. Like this one's just an injector cleaner. You could run this through maybe once a year if you're driving the vehicle a lot. It might help kind of clean up some of the deposits on the injectors, but it's not going to be a super catch-all one fix. If you're already having injector issues, this is probably not going to solve it. It's probably going to be a bigger issue that this won't solve. Here's the one thing I do recommend, and this was going to be this week's topic, but something changed. This is an engine flush. And why would we go with engine flushes? In the newer VVT engines, if we don't flush out all the contaminants within that engine, all it takes is a very small amount of carbon to plug up those minor holes in some of the cam phasers, and it'll cause nothing but issues within the engine. It'll cause the timing to be off. It'll cause things to not work properly. So it is recommended to do an engine oil flush, I would say once every 6 months. Now, if you run clean oil and you change your oil on a regular basis, you may not need this at all. If you had a vehicle that nobody did the oil change on it when they were supposed to, or ran it well beyond the oil change recommendation, you will need to use this. And this is to flush that stuff out of the engine and get your engine clean again. Usually when I buy a vehicle, if I questioned where I bought it from and how it was done and how it was maintained and taken care of, I will run one of these through the first time. And yes, guys, this is liquid moly. And I trust a lot of the liquid moly products. If somebody was to use a liquid moly, I would say if it didn't work, then there was a bigger problem to begin with. So oftentimes a lot of the liquid moly stuff is really good. A lot of the Lucas is really good. Some of the AMSOIL stuff is pretty good. I've used some of the AMSOIL stuff. Now, when you start getting into some of the other off-brand stuff, I don't trust that. I think they're just, some of them might only be like kerosene or something weird. You know, they won't actually be good quality stuff. Companies that have had to put their reputation on the line, especially in the racing industry, such as liquid moly, such as Lucas, these guys have had to put their name in front of racing for a very long time. And when they make product that doesn't work, they get called out really quickly. These are two really good companies that I would trust. AMSOIL, they're more known for their oil, not their additional stuff. Now I know they're selling their additional stuff and they're trying to promote that. And a little bit that I've used, it hasn't been super awesome, but it has worked. So I guess that is something to be said about that. RMH, Seafoam. I have Seafoam in my cabinet. Seafoam works, but it's a catch-all. It really, if you have a major issue that you're trying to use Seafoam to fix, it's probably not going to fix it. It's kind of a general catch-all. You can pour it into oil. You can pour it into gasoline. You can pour it on pretty much whatever you want, and that's what they say the Seafoam is. Honestly, Seafoam has really gone downhill, and there was a certain time that Seafoam was really good. Anything after that, it's not been as good. At that point, I lean on the liquid moly and the Lucas. That's where I go. If I'm doing an oil additive, it's going to be Lucas all the time because they got known in the racing industry for putting out good products, and their diesel treatments are top notch. Most semi-drivers nowadays will lean on the Lucas as far as an oil additive that they add into their truck, and it helps prolong the life of the engine and reduces wear. That's why they do it. Brian, yo, imagine not doing this, but being in a gym and getting in shape. Yeah, dude. Okay. When it comes down to it, when you work as much as I do, your work becomes your gym. The truth is when people work 60 hours a week or more, you don't have time to go to a gym every single day. How you're going to change that is eating differently. And I've started doing that. I got a lot more work to do yet. But by me cutting down on carbs and eating more protein has done way more for me than any time that I ever spent lifting weights when I was younger. It's done way more for me. I've tacked on more muscle in the last 6 months than I ever did as a kid. And when I was a kid, I was in the gym a lot. Hulk. There is a brand name Molno that is good. That is good too, made in Germany. Okay, that one I wouldn't know. I have not had much experience with them at all. So I will tell you on that one, I have no clue on that. RMH Nevada as a preventative maintenance product. Some of the stuff I've listed is good preventative maintenance, like running an injector cleaner once a year, doing an engine oil flush once a year. It's good preventative maintenance, and it'll help extend the life. And that's just one thing you can do. And that'll really help. Okay, let's get back to Brian here. He's punched in a bunch of stuff. Your heart is begging for you to hit the gym. Dude, I lift weights. Dude, I'm wearing a baggy shirt on purpose, okay? This is a Duluth Trading Longtail tee. Sorry, you're right. You're a good guy for ignoring me. Get that money. Yeah, okay. So yeah, as far as preventative maintenance, guys, some of these things work really well. So this, as a preventative maintenance, ran once a year, might help extend injector life. You might not ever have to change injectors in your car. The other one, running this through your engine oil once a year, will help take those contaminants out, push those out, make it so that it's a lot easier for your engine to run cleaner. The cleaner we can get our engines to run, the longer they're going to last. Carbon will kill an engine. And when it comes to dirt and debris being sucked in by your engine oil filter, I know I've shown this before, but let me do this again. This is a small little bottle of nasal spray, okay? Half of this bottle destroys your engine to where you have to rebuild it. Half of this. So, that much. That is the lifetime of the amount of dust that can be sucked into your engine. That's what we deal with when it comes to engines. It's very, very specific. There isn't a whole lot of leeway there as far as what you can and can't do with how much contamination can get inside that engine. If it gets a ton of contamination in there, that's what's going to happen. You're going to wreck the motor. And this gets on to the topic I really wanted to bring up to you guys. So, I can't. There. I had to take care of that quick. All right. I was going to put up a poll here for you guys, but I'll give it just a bit here. RMH, with those products, how about oil filters? Same or different when doing engine flushes? So engine oil filters, guys, I never buy the cheapest filter I can buy. The reason why is the filtration is too low on the filter. So I know people are going to say, well, you're already putting Napa filters in, so it is what it is. The reason I put Napa filters in is I have a Napa in the town that I live in. It's easier for me to get parts. But that being said, I do not run anything less than a gold filter. The reason why is I don't want to run the risk of having my engine not get filtered properly. Some engines are already really bad design on the filter system. Prime example, that Malibu. It has what I call an oil bath filter, meaning that the filter just sits down in there, the oil is brought up to the top, and it just bathes in the oil. And then it drips that back down and filters that way. I hate that setup. The reason why is it's not pressurized. The old metal can style filters, I'll show you. This is what the GMC Jimmy has. Metal filters. These will filter 10 times better than just the filter paper cartridge that you get. I know I got one of those here. No, I don't have it over here. But yeah, just the paper one with the plastic pieces on the ends, it doesn't filter very good because it's an oil bath filter. It just bathes in the oil, and that's how it filters through. These pressurized filters work a lot better, and they remove a lot more contaminants when you use a higher grade filter. So the reason that filters are cheaper is because they have less pleats in them, or the filtration level is a lot lower. When the filtration level gets low, that's when you start running into issues of getting contamination inside your engine. The more contamination, the higher chance you're going to wear out bearings or cause cam wear issues. And you don't want either one of those to come up. I always run high grade oil, which is usually a full synthetic. I use gold filters, and I change my oil every 5,000 miles, no matter what. The GMC Jimmy is every 4,000 miles, no matter what. That gets changed. I do not run that one past that. It's an older style motor, an older setup, and it gets into the topic that I kind of wanted to bring up. Yes, metal filters on the Kias and Hondas too. Yeah, it's a better filtration system. In fact, I can tell you what the Kia number is. If you have a 2.0 liter, right there's your filter number, 1334. That's what it is. The two O's, this is your filter. And I always run the golds. Never take the chance of running a low grade filter. If you could get a lower grade filter for cheaper, guess what? Don't buy it, buy the more expensive. The best filter is the old toilet paper filter set up on the tractors. Best system ever that I've seen. Yeah. I know what you're talking about, and that is a super old filter system. I'm surprised that somebody would even remember those. They were still nasty to replace though. Just made a mess everywhere. But supposedly they worked great. But yeah, when it comes to cars, never buy the lowest grade filter you can get. They're cheap. They're made cheap. The seals wear out. They don't last as long. You're going to be forced to change oil more often. And then what's the point of using synthetic? The worst scam that I just seen on one of my customers' cars is somebody was trying to be nice and took that car in for an oil change. Basically, my customer decided that, well, it wasn't even my customer. It was somebody that my customer was seeing at the time. Decided to take that car and go get an oil change done. So they didn't bring it to me. When they took it in for an oil change, you're to find out they never changed the oil. They changed the filter, put a new one on it, filled it back up, and never changed the oil. And now that engine oil is completely dirty, and I will need to do a flush if they decide to keep the vehicle. Now, the issue with that vehicle is it already got a leaking rear main seal, so I don't know if the customer is going to want to go that route, because in order to fix a rear main seal, the transmission has to come out. This is a massive job. It takes quite a bit of time, and it is very labor intensive. A lot of times I don't pull motors or transmissions unless I have a very valid reason to do it. Number one, the body would have to be immaculate. Frame two. If it's got a bunch of rust, I'm not doing a motor or transmission pull. Not worth it. Second, everything else tied to the vehicle must be in good shape, meaning that it literally only needs a motor or a transmission to be a perfect car. Those two conditions rule out about 99% of the cars that I've seen. And the only reason I would go through this is to bring up my topic with you guys. I'm going to create a poll, and I want to know what you guys' thoughts are. this out. Okay. All right, poll's coming up for you guys. Now you guys can vote. So here's what I've got coming. Do we want to do an engine change in the GMC Jimmy? And the reason I'm saying this, the vehicle is already an Arizona vehicle from back before I got it. Right now, it's my daily driver. I'm noticing some things with the engine. It's getting old. It's getting tired. It's got 100 and almost 70,000 miles on it now. The older motors don't last as long, meaning that you've got to fix them usually by 200,000. So I got a little bit of room. I don't drive as far to work anymore, so I have that as an option. But the choice is, do we go ahead and do this or do we not? I'm going to turn my heater off because that's going to be really annoying for you guys right now. Question is do we do the engine swap and do we do some performance upgrades in the process? And here's the thing, with fuel injected vehicles, you're limited on what you can do because you have to operate within the fuel injectors, within the cam specs. None of that can change because it's all tied to the computer. So you're locked there. You're locked there unless you do a full system, meaning that you're going to do a full overhaul of the computer, the harnesses, everything. Guys, get your votes in. I see there's only one vote. There's at least 4 of you guys in here. Get your votes going. We want to know this for the future. Right now, the main project is going to be Malibu steel. We got to get the deer hit stuff fixed. That's got to get done. But if this is something you guys want to see, I'm going to work behind the scenes with my people, and we're going to see if we can land our hands on a good used engine from maybe a junkyard. We'll take the time to strip it down. I'll show you guys what we're going to do. We're going to send stuff off to the machine shop to get machined, and we're going to go through the work of balancing that engine and getting it set. Now, I know that there's something crazy we could do with the GMC. If you guys are looking for that crazy, I don't know if I want to go that route. And I'll watch what the chats say here in just a little bit. But yeah, the important thing here is, guys, we're looking at content. We're looking at doing stuff for you guys. Normally, I don't recommend engine pulls, ever. Most of the time, the vehicle is not going to be worth the amount of money of you pulling the engine and doing it. The only reason I'm doing it is the body is in great shape. Everything else that is tied to it, I've gone through top to bottom. There's a few minor things I could do, but the bigger issue is going to come down to the motor and transmission as far as how much life I can get out of this. I could probably get another 5 years out of it, depending on how far I drive this thing all the time. I mean, I'm not driving it very far. The thing is that if I want to get it to last well beyond that, I should probably do it while everything is in good shape now. Begin taking the time to build that motor, get it set, get it dynoed, get everything ran on it, make sure it's solid, make sure it's a ready to drop in perfect engine before mine goes out. This is what you do to plan for the future when it comes to projects. Hulk asks, what will be the estimate amount of money to be spent on it? I know my producer is actually watching and wants to know that too. Here's the thing is, in order to do a decent job, machining and stuff is going to run you probably about $1,000. You're going to spend another probably $600 getting a decent engine to start with. So you're already up to, about $1,600 in order to get kind of your baseline done. The extra stuff that you're going to need are some of the parts that you're going to be replacing. So depending on how bad the engine is, we might have to do a bore, meaning that we will have to buy pistons. Then we have to buy rings. No matter what, we're buying rings no matter what, because anytime you take an engine apart, you always put new rings in the pistons. It's what you do, because anything less is a waste of time. Bearings have to be done. The hard part's going to come down to balancing. If I do an engine, I hate doing an engine that isn't balanced. It bugs me. I think it's a waste of time if you don't spend the money to balance it. And some of the balancing we might be able to do, but some of it I'm going to have a professional shop do it. And some of that balancing is going to be on the crankshaft. The crankshaft on a used engine should be balanced no matter what, because you don't know if there's a wobble in the crank. And the last thing you want to do is spend $2,000 to $3,000 to rebuild an engine and then have a wobble in the crank and have the engine break on you. You're spending way too much money to not have it at least checked. And if you're having it checked, you should have it actually balanced out. So that's some of the unknown factors, but realistically, budget would be no more than $3,000 to do the engine. Now, that being said, there's the other issue of the transmission. That vehicle already has an overdrive issue, which is related to torque converter lockup, meaning I'm also looking at the transmission having to be pulled, rebuilt, and put back in. And if I'm going to go through all that work of rebuilding both a motor and a transmission, I also want to make sure I'm going to get better fuel mileage with it. So I'm going to be talking to the transmission builder to do a gear change. I would like the gears spread back a little bit more. So I want to leave first gear where it is, but I want to push the other 3 gears out a little bit farther, so that when I'm going down the highway at 65 miles an hour, I'm only at about 1,800 RPMs. Maybe 19, but I don't want to be over $2,000 at 65 miles an hour. Right now, I'm at about 25. So pretty high on that. Now, the reason that they did that back in the day is because the motors have less compression. A factory 4.3 does not have very good compression from factory. They just don't. So that's the one thing I'm going to fix, because in order to actually increase fuel mileage, cause your fuel to be better, and for it to work better long term, bringing the compression ratio up is key. What do we see on most newer vehicles nowadays? Higher compression ratios. Compression ratios usually are about 10.5 to 11.5 to 1 compression. That's because we're running ethanol fuels. The ethanol fuels run much better on higher compression engines. So we're going to be bumping the compression up on our 4.3 if that's the route we're going to go. All right, so I'm going to check the votes and see where you guys are at. Oh, you guys are only at a 50-50 vote. Come on, guys, get your votes in. Get your votes in. Do we do this engine rebuild or do we not? RMH, my son has a 68 Dodge 440 and it went to the shop to be line bored. 40 over, regrind the crank, and it will get new bearings, pistons, rings. With that being a new electronic carb heads. Okay, so yeah, he's going the whole 9 yards so far. What I would suggest to him, though, is that he does get the connecting rods balanced. Because even if you line bore and you balance your crank, if you don't balance the connecting rods and pistons, you're still going to have that weird vibration. I've ran a stock crank, not machined, not checked, not line bored, stock crank, unbalanced connecting rods and pistons, and it ran like a sewing machine. And it had way more power than it had from factory, just by doing that alone. So that one, I would tell him, get your connecting rods and pistons balanced. Do not skip on that. You want to get those weights perfect between each cylinder, as close as you possibly can. There's a lot of money and energy, and of course, time spent. Yeah, uh, that's why I tell you guys oftentimes engine rebuilds are not worth it. The reason I'm even entertaining this idea, and we don't have to decide it today, but the only reason I'm entertaining this is I can make that vehicle last so much longer, almost to the point I don't need to go out and buy another truck. Not only that, but I'll bring you guys some very interesting content when it comes to actually chasing one of these down. Let's say we go ahead and do this. We bring the engine in. I put it on an engine stand. We start stripping it down. I can start showing you guys failures and fault issues with the engine, things that can go bad over time. That being said, we can actually figure out what we want to do with the particular engine. And if we like what we see, then we can say, okay, this is a good setup and this is not. And if it's not a good setup, what can we do to modify or change that? And this will be a good educational experience. It'll also be good content to bring to you guys. And honestly, it's what the truck does need. The truck does need to have a good engine put in it. It does need to have the transmission fixed. It doesn't mean that the truck isn't a good running truck right now. It's good right now. But 3, 4, 5 years down the road, those minor issues that I'm seeing are going to become major issues. It's got a pretty decent oil leak now that it's okay. I'm getting through. At some point, it's going to become too much of a nuisance, and I'm going to have to fix it. That being said, I can either fix it a little bit or I can fix it a lot and just be done with it. So that's really been my choice as far as do we want to do that. And then if I do that, I'm also going to need the Malibu here when I do that swap so that I have something to drive while that truck is down. So that would be a summer project. Now, I don't think it'll happen this summer because I don't know if we'll have the engine ready. This is going to be something that we'll have to do over a longer period of time. So probably over the next year or two, we would do this as a project on the channel. Again, this will bring a lot of stuff that you guys will see that'll be new content for some, and others it'll be more run-of-the-day mill stuff that they deal with all the time. But it'll give a pretty decent look at the internals of the engine and how it works and why we do certain things and why certain things need to be done on a certain setup in order to make that engine function even better than it did from factory. And that should always be the goal. Anytime you're doing performance-wise or you're doing anything like that, it's important that you look at what you're doing and decide what you're going to do with that vehicle before you spend the money. And I wouldn't even consider any of this if I haven't thought about what I was going to do with that vehicle prior to even recommending this to even my people behind the scenes. I've got people behind the scenes that I trust, that I bounce ideas off of. And if at any point I thought, okay, this is just a bad idea, I'm not going to do this, I wouldn't even bother bringing it up to them first. Second of all, you have to know what you're doing with it. Now, I know that I'm not going to take this thing off-roading. I'm not going to take it mudding. I'm not going to do anything crazy like that. This is still going to be a daily driver. So what I'm doing is I'm tailoring the engine to be a strong daily driver with the most amount of horsepower I can squeeze out of a stock engine, at the same time readjusting my transmission for better fuel mileage and fixing all of the problems that exist within those. Hulk, yes, this will be a great learning experience. I'm leaning on it. I'm not 100% yet, and there'll be a few more talks behind the scenes with my people, but I'm feeling pretty good about maybe pursuing a used engine here in the spring when I can get my Toyota out. Because once I have my Toyota out, I can go pick up the used engine, I can bring it back here, we can buy an engine stand, put it on the engine stand, slowly tear it down. We can look at the components and see what is good, what isn't, what we're going to use, what we're not going to use. Are we going to chase aluminum heads as an upgrade? That could throw the budget way out of whack. So if I was thinking of a $3,000 budget, you want to now throw aluminum heads on it, it's going to be on top of that. So that's the other thing, is I also have to keep it within a budget because I know what I have to work with. But at the same time, we want to do what is going to be best for the build too. And some of that also does come down to money management in the process. We're not going to go and blow out the budget and spend $10,000 on a motor in a daily driver vehicle. It makes 0 sense, especially a vehicle that is probably only worth $4,000. So some of it's going to be cost management versus what we can squeeze out of a stock engine. So keeping the cost down would be awesome. If I could keep it under $2,000, I would be thrilled. That would be one heck of a build for less than a few $1,000s. You know, that would make it to where most people would want to take that chance on something that had a good chassis. And that's what I'd be trying to do for you guys and show you guys. Any connecting rod to balance you would recommend for the 440? Okay. So my next question is power adders. What is he putting on it for power adders? If he's putting a turbo on it, if he's putting supercharger on it, if he's running nitrous, that's all going to make a difference on what connecting rods he runs. If he's going to keep it bare bone stock and just keep it as a pump gasser, he can get by with stock connecting rods. If he's going to do any kind of power adders at all in the future, then he's going to need to step up to a quality connecting rod, something a little bit more beefier, a little bit stronger, a lot better quality. Some of those will come balanced already, some won't. So sometimes doing the research as far as what you're going to do with it in the future is going to make that decision a lot easier. I would lean on getting a good quality set of connecting rods and not necessarily keeping the stock ones. The only time I keep stock connecting rods is if I'm keeping it 100% stock, meaning I'm not going to add any power adders ever. Our GMC, if we do this engine build, is going to be 100% stock. I'm not going to put a bunch of power adders on this thing. It's a daily driver, and it's not going to be beneficial for fuel mileage. Stock around 500 plus. What fuel is he running though? Is he going to be running race fuel? If he's going to run race fuel, that does make a little bit of a difference. You're going to want a better connecting rod. If he's just going to run, 87 pump gas on it, stock connecting rods are fine. But you're not going to get 500 horsepower on 87 octane unless you got really, really high compression and a big cam. Mr. Hebrew, my 4Runner keeps shaking. I clean the throttle control and change the plugs and coils, and you're still having shaking. If you've replaced all the timing components such as coils, coil packs, spark plugs, you've cleaned out the throttle body, Toyota 4Runner has a timing belt. I'd be looking at maybe your timing belt is not in spec anymore and it could have possibly jumped. Double check that timing. You should be able to pull a cover on it. I know my 04 Toyota Tacoma had a timing cover on it, and I was able to pull that off and check the marks. And you can check the marks on the cam with the back cover of the timing cover. So the back cover will be metal. There'll be 2 gears on the top if it's a twin cam. I'm guessing 3.4. Hopefully you're 3.4. If you are, there'll be 2 marks. One mark will be on the gears, the other will be on the cover. Those gears have to line up. That's a quick way to find out if you have an issue there. If you have a timing issue, you are going to have to strip it down and put in a timing belt. Yep, you have the 3.4 liter. Yep, so that's the same motor that I have in my Toyota Tacoma. Take that top cover off, check those timing marks. If you've already done throttle body, plugs, wires, coil, you've done everything that you can think of, and you have clean filters and no check engine lights, like if it's just rough shaking, usually a check engine light will tell you like if there's a sensor out. If you have any bad sensors, make sure you replace those first. But I would definitely check that timing, because rough idles and no check engine lights usually mean a timing issue, meaning something's not lined up and it's just running rough. So you can have it sometimes where it'll jump one tooth. That one tooth jump could be enough to throw the engine out of time to where it doesn't run right. If it jumps another tooth, chances are your pistons are going to hit your valves and you're going to wreck your motor. So it's worth the time to pull it and check it to see if it's even accurate. All right, Nathan, what do you think about 396s? I'm guessing you're talking about what is in the Chargers and Challengers. And yeah. Okay, so 396s. Great little engine, horrible on high RPMs. And the reason why is they used a very short piston. That short piston, if it gets caught for any reason during high RPM situations, it'll jam and wreck the motor. This was something that we started seeing when people started modding the 396s and doing a lot of performance stuff, especially when they wanted to put superchargers on them. Some people wanted to bolt that same supercharger from the Hellcat engine onto the 396s. The 396s had an issue with that though. So it's one of those where you have to really kind of look at like the quality of what you've got versus where you're going to go with it. Think about what you're going to do with it. As far as longevity, for the most part, anytime you deal with a performance engine, you're going to have stuff that breaks when you're pushing them. It's going to happen. There's no two ways about it. Actually, I think those were 392s. 396, are you talking about the old school GM 396s? Comment that down below. If you're talking about the old school 396s, I do have a story on that. Yeah. I'm just going to end the poll now. There we go. So, we had somebody get their vote in the last minute. It looks like you guys do want to see an engine build. Awesome. Yes, old school 396. All right, let's get into this. So, back in the day, my dad had an old school Chevelle. This Chevelle came with a 396 in it. And he had built it up, stripped it down, did everything to it, did a whole bunch of performance stuff to it, pistons, cam, heads, the whole 9 yards. And the engine had so much power that it kept breaking motor mounts. He literally had to chain the engine to the frame in order for it to stay in the car. So that's the old school. Yeah, I mixed up, sorry about that, guys. I mixed up the 392 Dodge engines that are in the newer stuff with the 396 old school engine. The 396 old school engine, it was a very solid engine. It was crazy power, and you really didn't have to do a super lot to it to tap into that power. It was pretty amazing. All right, so my producer said only 3 votes. I think we need more to decide. So, guys, I will open up that poll again next week. Make sure you guys tune in next week and get into that poll. Do we do the engine build for Crimson Vortec, which is our 01 GMC Jimmy? It has a 4.3 engine in it. If you guys don't know anything about 4.3 engines, they're literally a 5.7 with 2 pistons chopped off. It's same stroke, same bore, and pretty much the same crank setup, but missing 2 pistons. That's all that a 4.3 is versus the 5.7. Now, I know what you guys are saying. The crazy vote here would be, why don't you go get a 5.7 and bolt that in there after you've modded it? If I was going to turn this into a hot rod, if I was going to do anything crazy with it, where I wanted big, crazy power, I could understand that. That's not what this project is. This is a fuel economy vehicle. I'm not trying to go crazy, but I can do way more with that vehicle now than what they could back then. And some of it was just because they were lazy. It isn't because they didn't have the tools and the knowledge to do it. It's just that they were lazy. So we either fix the factory mess ups and make something better, or we leave it alone. And that's kind of my vote here, is to, if we're going to go for it, we're going to dig into this and really dig into it and figure it out. Nathan, wow, how interesting. Thanks. Yeah, he actually raced that car at a drag strip, and he placed third with that car. And he had the 396 in it. And it was crazy fast on a Chevelle. If anyone knows the old school 69 Chevelles, they were not light cars. They were very heavy. That being said, he made it have a ton of horsepower. And actually, when he sold the car, he sold it with that engine in it, and somebody wrapped it around a tree and destroyed the car. And I wish I could find the car, because even if it was, I would rebuild the frame and bring it back. But from what I understand, the car is completely gone. There's no tracking that car down. So I had a 66 Ford that had a 300 inline. Missed that engine. Just keep going, and decent on fuel. Yeah, the 300s were good engines. They were really good engines. For inlines, they were probably one of the top engines that most people went with on the older Ford stuff. You saw them in everything. You saw them in the pickups. You saw them in the Mustangs. You saw them in everything. 300 was a very common engine back in the day. And they were bulletproof. I mean, honestly, they were as bulletproof as the 350s were. I mean, you could just redline a 350. The Chevy 350s were unstoppable. You could overheat them, you could over rev them, you could do anything you wanted to them, and they still ran. It was a crazy, crazy, crazy time back in that era. The stuff that they made it was more bulletproof than it is nowadays. Nowadays, there's too many electronics, there's too many sensors, there's too many things that can go wrong, and all it takes is one thing to completely screw up your fuel mileage and the performance of the vehicle. But this is what we got to deal with now, because we're here in this time, not 40 years later, back in my father's day. RMH motor mount broke on a 76 Olds 442 455 motor. Same solution, chained the motor down. Had 2 4-barrels with a racing cam. It was your high school car. Yeah, that's a cool high school car. I mean, there's a lot of people who would kill for that car nowadays. But yeah, a lot of the old school stuff, when it had super high horsepower like that, you would definitely break motor mounts, and it was common for that to happen. We don't see that in motors nowadays, because most of them are either running, polyurethane mounts, or they're running direct mount frame. Motor mounts are bolted directly to the frame of the car, or it's to a subframe. When it's bolted to a subframe, you're not going to break it off the subframe unless you break the welds on the subframe. And I've heard of people modding Hellcats and having similar issues of breaking motor mounts. Also having them shoot the transmission out. They're pushing so much power out of it that the transmission was stock, and it just grenades the transmission. So, and that's the other reason why, if we're doing the build on Crimson Vortec, we're not going to ignore the transmission. Because right now, I do know that it doesn't hold torque converter lockup. And if it's not holding torque converter lockup, what's the point of doing all the other work? I mean, there is none. You have to have everything working together. And if I do it that way, what I can do is say, we built the engine, we dyno the engine, we know what the engine's running. Now, what we can say is, this is what we need our transmission to hold. This is how much power our motor is going to have going into this. That's why I'm telling you guys, when you do a build, this is the way you do it. You buy a used engine, you rebuild that used engine, you get it done, you dyno the engine. When the engine's dynoed, you know your horsepower. Now that you know your horsepower, now you know what to build your transmission for. Now that you have your transmission done, you check the rest of your drive line. Make sure your drive shaft is strong, make sure your U-joints are in good shape, make sure your rear axles are strong, that way you don't have any issues. One performance part causes a chain effect. And that's what I really want to drive home with this project, is we're going to be increasing the horsepower on the engine through what should have been normal done to it already from factory. And all we're doing is raising compression. We're not going to change the cam. We're not going to change the fuel injectors. We're not going to change the intake. That's all going to stay factory. The reason it's going to stay factory is I want to run the stock computer because I want to run stock fuel. I don't want to worry about where I'm going to get fuel for my truck when I'm got to go to work. It's a work vehicle, and that's what I want it to stay. That's not a high performance car. If I was going to build a high performance car, I'd build a 1,000 horsepower monster, probably a Challenger. I'd get my hands on a Challenger 392, strip the engine down, rebuild it, fix that fault that I told you guys about the pistons locking up, and then I would put a power adder on it. And that's how I would build a monster of a car. Or I would get my hands on a ZL1 Camaro, and I would just bolt on a better supercharger or change the pulleys on it and then have it dynoed. That would be even easier than the Challenger, yes, but ZL1s are getting so much more expensive to get than a Challenger by far. ZL1 is very expensive to even touch. I mean, I think like the cheapest I found that was in good shape was over $45,000, and that was about 6 years old. So we drag race cars for $100 a gear. And back in that day, there was only 3 gears, so it was only $300, but still, it probably took you a week to make that money. Give them first gear, the rest was history. Oh yeah, especially on the old the Power Glide transmissions, those were fun. You know, hit the Power Glide and you're going from first to second, and all of a sudden you're looking down and I'm over 100 already. You know, yeah. I remember some of the Power Glide days. It was definitely towards the tail end of when I started driving. They were already kind of going away until they started getting pushed back into the tracks again. But yeah, the old school Power Glides. It was crazy how they would run such crazy RPMs on those engines and then only shift between 2 gears. It was just, that was insane. Stub the throttle, left the front end off the ground. Great times, kids. In days we'll never experience. Yeah, RM, sad to say, it's true. Those days are long gone unless you're willing to spend at least $250,000 nowadays. I mean, it's going to take you a minimum of $200,000 nowadays to pull off a vehicle like that. If the parts are not there, everything you're going to have to get is going to be custom racing. You're going to have to go with a full drag setup. It's not going to be cheap. And when you're talking that kind of car, I mean, unless you're going to build it on your own, you're not going to find it. RMH Nevada. That car had a Hurst transmission. Ooh. The 442 with the Hurst transmission? Are you kidding me? Oh, I bet you would want that car back bad right now. That's an expensive car nowadays. Crazy expensive. Wow. Yeah. Some of the stuff that our parents played around with, I mean, yeah, I'm in my mid-40s now, but the stuff my dad had, man, just half the cars he had back then, I wish I could have gotten my hands on one of them. I mean, it was crazy what they had back then. Oh, and it was a sleeper? Oh, man, I would have had the 442 badging all over it. I wouldn't have been afraid to show that off. I would have been like, if you're dumb enough to even try it, you can lose. I'll take your money. All right, guys, this has been a good one. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. This has been a 2-hour one. I've got some stuff going on later today, and I got to get this taken care of. So next week, guys, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, because we're going to start digging into that deer hit on the Malibu. I'm going to show you guys that car real quick. Right there. There's already a nice package in front of it. You guys will get to see what the package is next week. RMH Nevada, hood was lifted by the windshield. Fizz clear the 4 barrels. Had them sticking through the hood, huh? You know what, RM? Everyone, welcome RM to the channel as a moderator. There you go. Everyone say hi to our new mod. I think his knowledge is going to be very useful for a lot of people. I like my mods to have quite a bit of knowledge of stuff so that if I'm busy in a project that they can answer some of these questions. So you seem really knowledgeable about what's going on. You've had a lot of experience with some stuff. You remind me of stuff that my dad told me back in the day. So congrats. Welcome to the mod squad. So that being said, guys, next week, you're not going to want to miss next week's topic. We're going to tear down the Malibu finally. We're going to get that front bumper cover off. We're going to get wheel liners out. We're going to get everything out from underneath the car, and we're going to look at how much damage is behind the back side of that. I do know there's some smaller plastic pieces that are broken. The AC condenser, the radiator are all in good shape. So I'm not worried that we went too deep on the damage, but I hit that deer hard, guys. I hit it hard enough that I bounced it off the windshield. That being said, I know how bad the bumper is cracked and how much all of the grills are just shattered. So all the grills are in, all the pieces are in. I could literally put this car back together in one shot. But I want to take the time and we want to peel this car apart so you guys can see exactly what's going on when you have deer hits or when you have stuff that you have to fix like this. You want to peel it back piece by piece and make sure that everything goes back together properly. RMH Nevada, I am 72 years young. Definitely old school. Have a great day. Thank you, RM, for joining the channel. Thank you for being here. Yeah, you've got a lot of experience that you could share with people that are on the channel. We're great to have you on. Guys, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you guys ring that notification bell. We do this every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central. And as always, it's a different topic every week. Next week, we're tearing into the Malibu. So guys, I'll see you on the next one.